Hello, this is Teddy. Today's episode is about California. Here are some facts about California. California is the most populous state with 39.5 billion people. It's the third largest state by area. The capital of California is Sacramento. The largest city is Los Angeles. California's economy is the largest in the country. If it were a country, California would be the fifth largest economy in the world. The governor of California is Democrat Jerry Brown. The senators are Democrats Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris. California sends 53 representatives to the U.S. House of Representatives, 39 Democrats and 14 Republicans.
Hi, everybody. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics. Sophie's on vacation this week, so you get just me. Today we're talking about the politics of California, and I'm going to warn you up front that California is an enormous place with an enormous number of people, and so we're not going to try to represent every possible thing in California. So I am here in this segment with Heather Young from Indivisible Sonoma County, and we're going to just chat a little bit about some things about California, some ways that people perceive California politics that may or may not be true. So, hi, Heather.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. So could you tell us just a little bit about what you do with Indivisible?
Absolutely. I am the representative from our Sonoma County Wine Country Indivisible who's serving as the state representative for state issues in California. And it's a relatively new part of Indivisible. Indivisible started as a national organization, and we are doing a ton in Washington, and started in California about 6 months ago once it was obvious that California was the new battleground for a lot of the Indivisible agenda, the more liberal and progressive agenda. So we started, I say we, I'm just the representative from Sonoma County, but Indivisible started a statewide organization to track and promote bills and candidates and the agenda here in California. And it's been pretty active so far, I have to say.
Yeah, and so California, for anyone who has never lived there or doesn't know anything about the politics there, California has a lot that the state sort of comes to a vote among everybody. So lots of things like propositions and even recall elections and things that it's a little more direct democracy than in some places.
Yeah, that's true. And unfortunately, it sometimes has the effect of kind of disenfranchising people because we have so many initiatives that come up on the ballot. It kind of gives some people an excuse to get confused and lean back instead of leaning forward. I grew up in a small farming area in Oregon, and then lived 20 years in Southern California, and now about 20 years here in Northern California. So I kind of feel like I get the cultures. And in Southern California, of course, there's a whole different attitude, a whole different culture, and it tends to be more conservative, quite a bit more conservative than Northern California. But there's a lot of conversation, a lot of activity, and a lot of points of view. I would say the spectrum is very wide.
Yes. Well, California is as large as a whole lot of countries. So it's certainly not monolithic. So what are some of the issues that are happening in California right now? What are some of the things that, and of course, again, this is a large population, but what are some of the things that people are really concerned with?
Well, I think it probably won't be a surprise that we're very concerned with immigration and what is sometimes called the sanctuary state and sanctuary city issues. We've been in the national news on that, of course, and there's many lawsuits, and quite a few Northern and Southern California attorneys, general and district attorneys are filing suits, and the California Attorney General is, of course, ready to do battle for our more progressive agenda. Californians like to say that if you don't like it here, you're you got 49 other states to choose from. And also, since we we contribute more to the federal budget than we get back, we kind of have that attitude of, hey, we're the fifth largest economy on the planet. And if we think that this is a better way to go, then we're going to go that way. So that's probably the thing that your listeners will be the most familiar with. Other things that we're taking on also because they may have failed at the federal level. One of them is net neutrality. We've got a very strong statewide initiative on net neutrality that fundamentally tries to reinstate what was in place before it was overturned by the Trump administration. And we're making some headway there because in a state that's very wired and very progressive and has obviously Silicon Valley and other organizations in it, there's a lot of forward thinking on that issue. So California has two chambers, a Senate and an Assembly. And a net neutrality bill that's actually pretty strict has been introduced in both chambers at the same time, which is usually a sign of some popularity. So there will be a vote on it, and it's not going to be legislators' favorite thing to vote no on. That's at least one of our goals, is to make that the case. And also offshore drilling. The Trump administration is trying to reopen. Well, I think actually thinks they have reopened offshore drilling off of the coasts of Washington and California. And we've got bills that we're promoting in the Assembly to fight that also. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't point out a couple of things in law enforcement. Indivisible has actually co-sponsored a state bill that requires the police and the sheriffs to hold open public hearings and transparent reporting when they're acquiring military-grade equipment. We believe that it's an escalation of violence to have military-grade equipment in our cities and our counties and to have our sheriffs and police with these tanks and such. So we want to make sure that if they are going to acquire them, that it's not done in a way that the public doesn't have full visibility on that. There's another bill that's a little bit surprising, maybe, that California has one of the most restrictive laws about releasing law enforcement personnel records. So what we're finding is that when a law enforcement officer is involved in, rape or shooting or a lot of things that would qualify as a felony investigation, that the public does not have access to their personnel records. And so Indivisible is pushing hard to see what we can do to at least open those up in the cases where there's been an accusation of wrongdoing against that officer. So that's probably the ones that I would choose just off the top of the, kind of covering the biggies. Of course, there's health care and other things too. It is a very blue state. The teachers union and the nurses union and the public employees unions have a lot of influence with our state legislature. And so we find that the floor of the Assembly and the Senate have some discussions that may never make it up in other states.
Yeah, so of the states that we've covered, this is our 10th state profile, and California is definitely the bluest of the states. The only other state we've done that's sort of considered a Democratic state is Illinois, and Illinois has a Republican governor right now. So California is really one of the few states in the country that has all Democratic, so a Democratic majority in both the state House and state Senate, and a Democratic governor, and 2 Democratic senators, and the majority of the delegation that goes to Congress. So that makes it somewhat unique.
It's been over 10 years since a Republican has held statewide office in California. Yeah, it's a pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. But there are, of course, Republican congressional districts in this state.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of amazing to think about that California has 53 congressional districts. That's just an enormous number. So we've done other states. Idaho has only 2. Utah has 4, and we haven't even covered some of the really small states that only have 1. So 53 is just a huge, huge number. Of those 53, 14 are Republican. So it's a large number of Republican seats. It's just a small percentage.
Right. Yeah, I suppose that's one way to look at it. And I know you had a podcast a week or so ago on, I think it's called Sister
District, yeah.
Yeah, sister districts where people are kind of exporting their blueness and assisting progressives in other areas. And that's been a huge part, actually, of our local Indivisible group, too, because we've got very solid representation from here. And we have a bit of an older and we admit somewhat privileged economically group here in wine country. And so we've actually had people travel to other parts of the state. Twice a week we have groups writing handwritten postcards. We've had a lot of, just a tremendous amount of activity working on what we call out of district to assist the progressives. And I think you mentioned that you're talking to Regina Bateson in running against McClintock. And of course he and Nunez on your other guests too. Those are super big hits for us. And we've strategically picked the people that we're trying to support. And we have sent people have volunteered to go door to door. And I can't even tell you how many postcards and things we've done to assist those districts.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's kind of surprising if you look through the list of the 53 congressional representatives is that although there aren't that many Republicans, the Republicans that are in office are terrible. They're the people you hear about all the time. Dana Rohrabacher and Kevin McCarthy, Steve Knight, Devin Nunes, Tom McClintock. Like these are like the really evil Republicans. So it's kind of surprising if you think about this as a really blue state that there are these sort of really, really Republican districts.
Well, it's, been the trend the last 20 years or so to get the districts to be really solid one direction or the other. And that's certainly reflected here. I would say in McClintock's district, it's got, I don't even know how many square miles it covers. So he's got so much, it's hard for his people to get a lot of momentum together because they're really spread out and it's pretty rural. But yeah, you're right. I mean, these representatives, they're smart and they're very well supported at home. And they kind of have nothing to lose by going farther and farther to the right. And that's why we just feel it's so important to do what we can to stop what they're doing nationally. And I would say that it brings up being so blue. I mean, just kind of swinging the other way, being so blue gives an opportunity for liberals and progressives to start the infighting that, we see at the national level and certainly occurs here in California. I don't know how much people outside of the state will have known that our Senator Dianne Feinstein, who's one of the very senior people in the Senate, did not get the endorsement of the Democratic Party here in California, which says probably a lot more about the Democratic Party than it says about Senator Feinstein. But, the traditional thought is that the Democratic Party is different from the Republican Party, not just in how their views and values, but just in what they mean when they say they're a party. And in such an overwhelmingly blue state, we have some different shades of blue, you might say. At the state legislature, for example, there's a group called Mod Dems. They call themselves Mod Dems, which is short for moderate Democrats, and they are the more conservative Democrats, and they're the ones who take oil money, because we do have a lot of oil here in the state, and they take, money from tobacco companies and other things that aren't on the liberal agenda, and that's a reason, too, that we're putting a lot of thought and effort into campaign finance reform. Boy, that's kind of the impossible task there, but it's the root, love of money is the root of all evil, as they say. And so we're kind of got that in our sights to see what we can do about that. But when we start to look at Democrats in the state, there are definitely many flavors.
Well, and so this is odd to me. So I'm in Illinois and we have very early primaries, and the parties don't endorse typically anybody in the primaries. So can you explain a little bit about this system? So you have this weird sort of jungle primary and you have a convention where the party might choose to endorse. How does all of that play out?
Yeah, I am not a party affiliate, and I don't think many in Indivisible are. None of us knew each other who are in team leadership positions in our Indivisible, knew each other before we joined up as political allies. And I also don't think anybody was particularly strong in the party beforehand. It's